Welcome back, everybody. It is good to see you all still here, even though Halloween is over. Some of you may be asking, why am I still doing these movies? Halloween is over. People are tired of watching horror movies. And here's my response.
Why do you people always question why? Ask why, when how is so much more fun.
Alright, that's enough Spawn clips for this video. And the real reason is because I was lazy and I started uploading these videos late. So, sue me. But there are still good recommendations to come. So, sit your ass down and let's jump in. Noroi is a 2005 Japanese horror movie. The kind of scares or the monster or villain in this movie are aliens, ghosts, and people with basically mind powers. My first thought of this movie is that it's surprising it came out in 2005 because holy shit, this movie looks like 10 years older than that. I know movies that came out in the 90s that have better video quality than this movie. Normally, I would say subbed, never dubbed, but for this kind of movie, who the hell cares? This movie sucks. Honestly, I could talk shit on this movie all day. This movie really reminds me of Paranormal Activity. Not a whole lot goes on for about, let's say, an hour and 30 minutes of a movie that's an hour and 45. I mean, they'll have bits and pieces throughout the movie to mildly keep your interest, but overall, nothing really happens until the very last couple minutes of the movie. Essentially telling you that the only good part of this movie is the ending. And yeah, I know they say the ending is the most important part of this story, but if that's the only part of your story, it's still a shitty story. I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 10. It was such a disappointment. It was long, it was boring, and I do not recommend this to any person whatsoever. Dagon came out in 1980. It's an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. The kind of horror that you're going to see in this movie, you're going to have monsters, you're going to have cults, sacrifices, and like body transformation. And overall, the quality of this movie is kind of like a Stephen King straight to the Sci-Fi Channel. And really, most people who watch this movie, they just have one question on their mind.
Will there be boobies?
Short answer, yes. You are going to see some boobies on this movie. Funny enough, while I was making this video, I was just pulling this trailer as, like background video. And I shit you not, this trailer is on YouTube. It seems like this was a publicly sent out trailer, like it was in, it was like on regular TV. And it had boobies in it. How did this one slip under the radar? The best way I could describe this movie is missed opportunity. Honestly, I absolutely love the story. I love the scenery, I love the cult, I love the rituals, I love the body changing and everything. I loved all of it. It's just the acting is really not very good. The main character does encounter a local drunkard who's actually been able to get away from the cult the entire time he's been living on the island. Who the hell knows why he stays there? But I mean, they might explain it in the movie, but it doesn't really explain why he continues to stay there. But his accent and voice is so hard to understand. I had to turn on the subtitles, and I actually speak fluent Spanish, and this whole movie takes place in Spain. A lot of Spanish words being said in this movie, and I still had to turn on the subtitles. I really want to give this movie a much higher rating, but if I'm being honest, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. If they remade this movie with better actors and just even if they went with the same kind of practical effects or just slightly better, it'd be such a great movie. It would be an easy 8 out of 10. Baskin came out in 2015. It is a Turkish horror movie that has a lot of violence, cults, body torture kind of things. You could compare a lot of it to the Silent Hill kind of movies where there's like crazy demon cults where people are just like mangled and twisted and everything. And the movie starts out with getting to know our main characters who are policemen, and you get to know how much of a buddy buddy kind of situation they have. And they have a genuine first half of Goodfellas where everything seems super cool, and you're like, all right, this movie is making me want to be a gangster.
Bing, what are you doing here? I thought I told you to go f your mother.
But then it turns into the second half of Goodfellas.
You gonna let this fucking punk get away with that? What's the matter? What's the world coming to?
The acting in this movie is pretty well done. I absolutely love the practical effects in this movie, especially because there's so many movies nowadays that are trying to convince us that CGI is better than practical effects. And with very few exceptions, like, The Avengers or Game of Thrones, practical effects are usually the way to go. What this movie is lacking is the story. There are several moments in this movie where you think like the underlining plot, or maybe that there's going to be a twist at the end that's going to make everything make sense and come into full circle. And it comes into a circle, but it's drawn by someone who hasn't taken a single art class before in their life. I mean, that is the main reason why I would give this movie any lower kind of a grade. The acting is good, the music and the soundtrack is very good, the practical effects are very good, but the most important part of a movie is the story and how it's told. And by the end of the movie, you're a little underwhelmed. I mean, they have a bit of a twist ending, but the payoff just doesn't, you don't feel it. It's really not there. I will admit, after getting into a very heated debate with one of my siblings over this movie, apparently there are videos explaining much more in depth what this story means and breaking it down, and apparently it makes a whole lot of sense if you're already very familiar with Turkish culture. And my argument is, if you want to reach a wider audience, ergo make more money with your story, you have to tell a story start to finish that everyone can get behind. Take example Lord of the Rings. They have exposition at the very beginning for everyone who didn't read the book or didn't watch the cartoon Hobbit. And who likes Lord of the Rings? Damn near every person on the planet. So I'd give this movie I give it a 6.5 out of 10. Fault is a movie that came out in 2015. It's a drama thriller, essentially focusing on cults and mental manipulation and what it takes to basically convert someone to a cult and to break someone away from a cult. This is a very well-made movie, especially the acting is, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. The main character, you definitely believe this guy is 100% a loser. There's even a moment in the film where he's being paid for one of his books with a $10 bill, and he actually looks it up to the light to check that it's real. Has anyone ever checked to see if they're being fooled by a $10 bill? And you can't help but feel bad for the guy because he's basically just, he keeps on trying to do the best that he can. The main girl and the parents, they're all done very well by incredibly capable actors. And they're all pretty famous actors. You can recognize every single face of the four main characters that you'll see in this movie. There are a few other characters, but they play incredibly minor roles. And there are really moments where you don't quite know what's going on, and you feel bad for our main character because he is doing the best that he can, and he's just like, none of this makes sense. Everything is just so fucked up. This isn't really much of a horror movie. I mean, it kind of falls... Technically, it falls into the category of a Halloween movie because it has to deal with cults and it has to deal with mental manipulation. Personally, this is one of the movies that is definitely in the top tier for this season. It is incredibly well made, start to finish. I mean, you kind of do wish there was a little bit more, so there is that knocking against it a little bit, but overall, with what you get good stuff. This movie, I'm giving it an 8, maybe 8.5 out of 10. The Changeling came out in 1980, is considered one of the most classic of horror movies. I mean, it is technically a horror movie because there's a haunted house, there's ghosts, there's a lot of kind of surreal, supernatural things that do happen. I mean, it's not the scariest of scary movies, but yeah, it still falls under that category. And for a movie that came out 40 years ago, it holds up pretty well. I mean, definitely there are some moments where you feel like it has aged a bit when either it comes to the shots or basically how the story just goes start to finish. There are actually a few moments in the movie where I was kind of lost because a lot of the mystery of the ghost happens in the past. So our main character is basically trying to piece together what exactly happened back then. There is a death in this movie that's actually pretty brutal, especially for, the time period of this movie. You really didn't think anything like that brutal came out during that time, and when it came on screen, I was like, holy shit, this movie's not fucking around. So judging a 40-year-old movie that I've seen for the first time, walking in fresh, it was pretty well done. I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10 because it is still a little old, and when it comes to Halloween movies, there are absolutely better, scarier movies that are much more current, that have very similar plots and themes like haunted houses and ghosts. And yeah, I predict will hold up just as well, if not better, than this movie. Give it a watch if you're into super classic horror movies. And if you're not into that and you want to watch something more new, I mean, the list is endless with haunted houses and with ghosts essentially haunting people. Next batch down, only 2 more to go. Thank you very much for listening, and give it a like and subscribe if you're wanting to hear more about, horror movie recommendations for this time of year. I know Halloween is over, but any time of the year is the time for a horror movie.